Paul Maynard.
Mr Deputy Speaker, it's a pleasure to contribute to this debate. Bearing in mind that we only have 6 minutes, whilst I endorse the vast bulk of the government's proposals in this framework, I will focus on the one tiny aspect of which I have a slight concern over, which is the chapter on the historic environment in the framework. Now, to that end, I have two non-pecuniary interests to declare. Firstly, I remain, for reasons I don't yet understand, still a member of the National Trust, an organisation which has not gone up in my estimation in recent weeks, it has to be said. Perhaps more importantly, I am also a member of the 20th Century Society, which campaigns for the protection of buildings constructed during the last century. Now, the 20th Century Society, when it first comes into contact with many heritage assets, they are not designated as being listed assets. So they find it very difficult to get government to take them seriously. And their concern, and the concern of many amenity societies, is that this chapter in the framework only concerns designated heritage assets. It does not concern the other aspects of heritage that may be brought into play. And given the emphasis on localism and neighbourhood planning and local groups right down at the grassroots, bringing together local plans, putting what they want to see first, my concern is that many types of architectural heritage that ought to be valued, but perhaps aren't for one reason or another, might not get the full consideration that they deserve. And this might seem a seemingly subtle discrepancy to many in the chamber, but I do actually think it is an important one. Let me try to give an example. Just this month, the World Monuments Fund, which many of you may not know exists, but does exist, it has a monument watch that it publishes each year of sites around the world of historical importance that are under great threat. And it is the one that they have issued this month has British Brutalism as a genre. Not a reference to this chamber, I can assure you, but actually to 3 specific sites in the UK. South Bank, which the government sadly failed to list despite English Heritage's recommendations. Birmingham Central Library, which I'm sure one of the opposition front bench knows is a long-running saga. And also Preston Bus Station, which is equally a long-running soap opera. And all 3 have been highly controversial. None are listed. Yet there is a great concern amongst the amenity societies that because they aren't listed, how can they be catered for? The Architect's Journal, describing brutalism in its most recent edition, described it as, and I quote, fashionably unfashionable, which is perhaps a sort of good description, I think, of how many of us regard some of what we might think of as the concrete eyesores in our constituencies. And I think it is a great concern that what isn't immediately aesthetically pleasing to ourselves, us as members, or indeed as our constituents, or even to local communities, but may, at some future point, have a very great historical value and heritage value, are not going to get the necessary protection they deserve after this framework. And whilst I welcome the ambition of shrinking it from 1,000 pages to 100 pages, brevity is not just the soul of wit, I would hope, but also the soul of clarity. We do need to make sure that some statutory protection that did exist beforehand remains. Now, I do seek reassurance from the ministers, because given the degree of local autonomy that is proposed, there is a great concern that they won't be protected. And that reassurance, might I suggest, can come in a number of ways, not just in terms of tweaking the framework or more words even, but perhaps in reconsidering what role the Minister sees for statutory bodies like English Heritage, existing amenity societies that cover not just the 20th century, but the Victorian era, the Georgian era, and back and beyond, but also what role he sees DCMS playing in interacting with neighbourhood plans. How can we ensure that when a local village is considering its neighbourhood plans, say, and it has what some might call a concrete monstrosity, others might call a beautiful example of postmodernist bungalow or whatever, that they actually don't just consider their own aesthetic impressions, but actually their heritage value of what they have within their community. What steps can be taken to ensure that the amenity societies and their legitimate concerns are respected? I know we are engaged in a consultation process. I don't expect an answer now, but I do hope that some reassurance might be forthcoming in the very near future. Thank you.